Today's episode is Healthy Start, so it's the surprising connection between infant feeding practices and allergies. And we're very lucky to have Dr. Michael Brandwein join us, and you are the co-founder of MyOr. Um, for those that are just tuning in, what they're going to get out of today's episode is education around how to prevent infant allergies, but also how to optimize diet to improve the microbiome and the immune system. And so, with that, Dr. Brandwein, I'd love for you to give a little bit of your intro and why you started MyOr.
Sure. So again, thanks for having me here. I started MyOr actually after leading an academic research group, like you mentioned, the microbiome. I studied the skin microbiome for a while when everyone else was looking at the gut microbiome and how that was affecting really everything in health. I started looking at skin microbiome, and then I got my first clinical exposure to children's eczema. And my focus was on the microbiome, but as I was, in the clinic and getting to know them and getting to know the science around them, I realized there's a tremendous opportunity around predicting childhood conditions that are part of the atopic march. And the atopic march is a number of conditions. Atopic dermatitis, eczema, and food allergies are part of them. And that was really when we started our journey to try to predict food allergies, predict eczema, before they develop.
This is very fascinating. So, for those that are joining that aren't from the natural nipple audience, my background is I'm a primary care nurse practitioner. My name is Loren, and my research was in the gut microbiome, actually in preterm infancy. We were looking at longitudinally how to prevent basically babies from dying from sepsis or from necrotizing enterocolitis, and really like what can we control in that clinical setting. So the focus there was more how do we help the immune system as the baby develops over the first 1,000 days and keep them strong and well. And like over and over the results kept saying like just give breast milk longer. Obviously you can't always control if you have an emergent cesarean. But your work in the field of the skin microbiome is really interesting and I think a little bit newer.
Yeah.
um, I'd like to dive into, have you analyzed any factors, controllable factors that parents can use to buffer and improve the skin microbiome of their children?
Yeah, totally. So I want to make a distinction here also. I have my academic past where I did all that research, and I think that's what I'm going to pull on to answer the question. Then we also have the risk factors that we're looking at in the company now to predict. Specifically when it comes to the skin microbiome, they're modifiable. But there's a catch-22. We know that there are certain things that affect the skin microbiome. For example, cosmetics, lotions, moisture, humidity, indoor air quality systems, so many different things. We know that they affect the skin microbiome, but we can't really engineer the skin microbiome yet to where we want them to be. There's some really interesting studies out there showing that we're on our way, and we may be
Yes.
able to one day, help someone, give someone the right advice. Take this cream to get to this microbiome, or or change this lifestyle habit so that we could make you healthier, or have less pain, less rashes, whatever it is. We still got a while to go though until we get there.
Yeah. I was found this really fascinating because after leaving to start the natural nipple to make it easier for parents to provide breast milk for longer. So I had like 2 semesters left in my PhD. I began learning about this community, and I believe it's in the rainforest near the Amazon called Cacherta. And they have like this incredible, what I call like a roadmap for a balanced skin microbiome. And I
Okay.
think why that matters is if you think of us as humans, like our largest organ is our skin. And we are 90% by volume, basically microbial DNA. So for parents that are listening, like what does this mean? Like what does this matter for my children? If you think of someone like your skin is your armor, And there's like tiny little warriors that can actually work for your kid that are colonizing their skin. And what was so interesting about this community in Cacerta is they had no dermatitis, they had no acne, they had no incidence of skin cancer. What you can assume is a very beautifully balanced microbial community on the skin that acts as part of our natural defense against invaders and pathogens. Um, I just say that because I'm curious around your thoughts in terms of like best practices in a modern environment where, exactly like you said, you can't always control, especially if babies are born in the neonatal unit. Like you've got tons of antimicrobials and caustic air conditioning and light, and but the most important thing is keep the baby alive. So how can we buffer in a modern world the microbes that work for us?
Yeah, so we all know that there's all these conditions out there, autoimmune conditions, atopic conditions, that have kind of been, spiraling out of control in the last few decades. And that's very much tied to modern lifestyle. We see, the prevalence of these conditions go up as a society's socioeconomic status, gets better and better. So for sure, there's an element to modern lifestyle, although it's fantastic for so many things, that kind of challenges the immune system, and the microbes, the microbiomes is a really important part of it. So if we're looking for something modifiable, something that we could potentially do to kind of mitigate maybe the small detrimental effects that modern day lifestyle has, we could, look back to where we came from, what our bodies are primed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many interesting studies out there. I'll throw out the one about dogs. There's some amazing microbiome studies about dogs, and then there's also some, epidemiological studies about dogs as well. We know that the more a family um, has interaction with their dog, or first of all, if a family has a dog, but then also the more they have interaction with the dog, the more they're passing their microbes from one another, which is a good thing, right? It's not a bad thing. We want to be sharing those good microbes one another. Um, and then playing outside, the sunlight, all these elements of traditional human lifestyle that somewhat have gotten lost over the last few years. Those are things we want to tap into to make sure that our microbiome is as strong and healthy as possible. I'll also add that the microbiome, like you said, it works in tandem with our skin, which is the largest organ in our body by surface
Yeah.
area also. And we want to make sure that our skin is also in prime conditions so that the microbiome and the skin can work together. And we know that a lot of practices associated with modern day lifestyle are challenging the skin and the immune system in the skin. There's the epithelial barrier hypothesis, which is really, really strong out there now, which is saying that there's all the chemicals and pollution and everything that we're exposing our bodies to are kind of challenging the immune system, and our bodies, our skin, our immune system, they don't really know how to handle it, and that's partially to blame. For the rise in food allergy occurrence. And we know that people who have defective skin barriers, whose skin aren't as strong as they should be, are at much, much, much higher risk for food allergies. So those people
Yeah.
especially should be taking care of their skin or their child's skin, implementing, like I mentioned before, those, harping back to where we came from, a little more sunlight, a little more nature exposure, a little bit more exposure to dogs and to getting out there to the petting zoo once in a while. These simple things that we used to do as humans historically can be so good for us.
Yeah. Yes, and um, I'm curious because MyOr is basically you're doing predictive modeling, but can you talk to me a little bit about how you serve parents and babies today and what the
Sure.
future looks like for you?
Sure. Yeah, so we believe really, really, really strongly in proactively engaging parents in ways that we could actually help them out. If I were to go tell you that your child is at risk for food allergies or at risk for eczema, and I wouldn't really be able to help you with that information,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be so much of a help to you. You'd probably start worrying about things, but there wouldn't be much for you to do about it. So we make sure to first go after diseases where we know that there's a easily implemented solution, preventative solution. And when it comes to food allergies, there's a whole host of studies that have come out over the last decade, and there's really been a revolution because we know that we can now prevent food allergies. The landmark LEAP trial was published just over a decade ago by researchers out in the UK who showed that the early introduction of allergens, specifically peanut puffs in the form of bamba,
Mm-hmm.
prevent food allergies, prevent
Mm-hmm.
peanut allergies. And then a bunch of other studies were done for other allergens as well. For example, on milk, sesame, fish, eggs. And more or less, they've kind of shown this consistent result that we shouldn't be preventing our children from consuming allergens at an early age,
Mm-hmm.
but we should really be encouraging it as soon as the baby is ready to start complementary feeding, and obviously to give them the allergens in an age-appropriate formulation. So
Yes.
we know with food allergies that we could prevent food allergies, but we have to get that message out. So the way we get that message out is we use our predictive tool. We make it completely free. Everyone could go on our website and take the survey. It takes 90 seconds to fill out. Any parent can fill it out. That's at myorcare.com/survey,
Yeah.
myorcare.com/survey. Fill out the survey. Once you fill out the survey, one of our professionals, our dietitians, sit and review the information. And when they review the information, they're looking to see if the individual has these risk factors that have been proven to be associated with food allergy and eczema risk.
Yeah.
And then importantly, we direct those patients, or really those parents, sorry, towards dietitians, because dietitians are the ones that are empowered to help parents prevent food allergy. This is a dietary intervention endorsed by all of the major professional societies, from the American Association of Pediatrics to all of the allergy associations in the US. And really around the world. And
Mm-hmm.
our dietitians are there to help parents through this early introduction of allergens of solids and allergens process. And
Mm-hmm.
importantly, I'll just lastly put out there that this process is covered by most private insurers. So very often there's no out of pocket, if not a little out of pocket cost for the parents.
Yeah, I'm looking at your site right now, and this is so beautiful and important, and I think as well addresses a lot of the early concerns that I've at least seen with some of our patients. And it might be difficult to tell quite early on if your child is beginning to develop an intolerance because they can't communicate so well, right? So oftentimes, like the way they communicate is by screaming, and there's three things that they need. They need to be fed, they need to be touched, or they need rest at that time. And so going back to these principles of how we evolved and in community and in tribe, I just want to add an interesting piece of information because I remember studying under my advisor, and she was looking at the microbiomes in nomadic regions of Africa, and also heavily rely on basically nature's technology to solve for water, for nutrition, for immunity, which is breast milk. And I say all that understanding how difficult it is to continue to breastfeed in the modern world. And that's where the natural nipple tool makes that 83% easier than other bottles. But what was very interesting about their living habits and practices is they were quite seasonally nomadic. So they were eating a diversity of food as well as like being physically in dirt and very, very close to the land. And basically, like a key concept that we saw, and how can we prevent the most fatal conditions from an imbalance of gut bacteria or microbiota, was diversity of those bacterial species. And they had just such incredible diversity. So that's something that I imagine like your dietitians that are covered mostly by insurers, and that's for those listening in the US, can help guide parents through, is like where to source food from at developmentally appropriate times, what types of foods to be introducing out of curiosity, because we work now in partnership with a Tiny Health who's doing microbiome sequencing. So part of our aim, and we're launching this on the site actually in the next month, is to, as you're beginning to transition from breast milk only, help give very specific data driven insights based on your baby's unique microbiota in terms of what they can eat. And is that something that your dietitians are doing as well? Or, okay.
Yeah, so there's no doubt that the transition from lactation towards solid foods is a seminal event in your child's microbiome development. There will be no other event like that probably for the rest of the child's life in terms of changing the trajectory of the microbiome. And
Yeah.
for sure, that's gonna, let kind of bring in the right, hopefully, the right microbiome to kind of bring things forward for the rest of their life. So we don't yet have a partnership with Tiny Health, but I'm all for integrating as much data as possible and making those data-driven decisions and making sure that we're really setting our children up for success moving forward, for sure.
Yeah. That personalization, especially if they're, I love how you call it like this. It's a massive event, right? Introducing solid foods. And I think as well, if you've had any of the risk factors, such as cesarean delivery, child that's been hospitalized early in life in the neonatal unit, those two main things, not as much skin to skin, not as much breastfeeding and prolonging of breast milk, which ideally is 6 months minimum that you're giving human milk, optimally 2 years. So if you've had any of those experiences, there's no shame. You've done the best you can as a parent. This is more of a corrective, okay, how do we step in and do what we can now with modern
Totally,
tools? Yeah.
totally. You have your set or your child has a set of risk factors that are affected by what mom has done, what the parents have done, the environment that they're bringing the child up in, and what some events that the child has gone through, for example, whether the child's been prescribed antibiotics or not. But not all of that is modifiable. If mom was prescribed antibiotics during pregnancy, she was prescribed antibiotics during pregnancy because she needed those antibiotics. That's not a modifiable risk factor. We can't change that, and we're not planning on changing that. But there are certain things that we could definitely go ahead and change and steer that child towards the right trajectory. And here again, I want to fall back on those guidelines that started changing in 2017 and are continuously updated by NIAID, by the AAP, by the Quad AI, by basically every professional organization, both in the US and abroad, uh, promoting the early intervention of allergens when the child is developmentally ready for solid foods. And that is the major way to prevent food allergies. And that's best done when someone is there to hold your hand. And those are our dietitians who are there to hold your hand and kind of walk you through the process, the right amount at the right time, looking out for the right reactions or the wrong reactions, and making sure that the child's getting, or the parent and the child are getting all the support that they need. I'll add also importantly, there should never be any restrictions on mom's diet. Moms, they do a lot for their children, and sometimes they try to go the extra mile by restricting a certain type of food because they're afraid that that's going to affect the child's allergy status. So that is right now that it's off the shelf. None of the professional organizations
Yeah.
are promoting that. We don't want to be restricting mom's diet. In fact, we want mom's diet to be as diverse as possible. That's going to give the baby and the baby's developing immune system the best tools that the baby can get from mom.
Yes, that's so well said. And if I may just provide, an analogy from the clinical background, your your child is immune incompetent for the first 2 years of life. And so they're basically like they're this iOS that gets to be programmed, and like the way to program this in the best possible way is by keeping them attached to the breast with that skin to skin, because basically there's a unique crosstalk that occurs from the baby's saliva And the mom acts as the immune protection. So she's passing very specific and unique antibodies because you're assuming if you're connected that you're in the same environment to help fight off viruses or bacterias that would be detrimental to the baby's health. And so that's why we really emphasize with the natural nipple tool, how can we make this easier for mom to do that? But as well, the microbiota is helping present these new pieces of the world, these artifacts that don't need to be so threatening to the baby's life in the future, to self, and like saying, okay, can we tolerate this? So it's actually functioning as the baby's like learned immune system. And so
Totally.
that's where this principle of like let mom eat as much as she can is so critical. Eat as diversely and as close to the land as you can is very important. And I'll just give a quick case study, and I know we have to jump, but there was a mom, and to be quite honest, I didn't even realize all of the specialties that you can go to if you have an infant that like can't sleep and is screaming and is arching their back. She had spent about 15,000 going to like baby chiropractors, just trying to figure out what was going on. And when we were able to sequence that baby's gut bacteria and actually create a plan for mom's diet to reintroduce foods and correct that and give a tool as well for improving the breastfeeding process. She was like, wow, I just wish I knew this existed, 10,000 hours earlier and $15,000 earlier. So that's how important getting this type of nutritional support can be. And it's amazing what you're doing. And I'd love to talk in the future also around partnership too.
It's fantastic. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me today. This was fantastic.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Okay, so just to reiterate, where can parents find you?
Okay, so parents looking to see a dietitian for anything related to their child and their child's development from infancy through toddlerhood and even beyond could find us at myorthrive.com, MYORTHRIVE.com. And parents looking to take the survey, free survey, anyone could go ahead and take it to figure out if their child's at risk for food allergies and or eczema can catch us at survey.myorcare.com.
Awesome.